My name is Britta Noresten, and I'm a painter from Gothenburg, Sweden. I started doing self-portraits when I was probably around 14, or started doing them on a regular basis. Like my first self-portrait I did, I think there's one from when I was 9 years old. I remember doing that one. And it was a huge relief for me to find a way to see myself that was not about being a pretty teenage girl, not about this conventional beauty, but instead seeing my face as a possibility of expression. I mean, I've tried to free myself from the male gaze by kind of portraying myself with my own gaze and portraying the world with my own gaze. But of course, living in a world, you don't have that much power over what surrounds you when you're out in the street or in the world. I see my paintings in general and my self-portraits in particular as it's almost like each painting is a letter, and together they create words, and those words can create sentences. But so each on their own is just a tiny fragment, and I tend to see my painting as a sort of continuous activity where each work in itself has some sort of value and some sort of meaning to me, or an emotion attached to them, but they're a part of a bigger work, in a way that that there's this almost like stream of consciousness process. For me, growing up with two sisters, so growing up in a family where we were 4 women, 1 man, I lived in a very female-centered world, and I grew up without knowing that there were limitations for me for being a girl for a long time, until I started school. I think I heard the word feminism probably the first time when I was around 13 or 14. I'm not sure what context, but I think it was probably through music and pop culture. And I remember writing an essay about it when I was 14 in school. We had to write an essay, and I wrote about feminism, and I still have it. And I reread it a couple of years ago and was kind of struck by how the questions that I was writing about then, although kind of formulated in quite an immature way and not very eloquently, were the foundation was the same as what the things I'm thinking about now, and the reason that I'm still interested in feminism. Education and representation are the keys to a greater freedom, to a greater equality and a greater empowerment. We need to try to, especially with kids, treat them as individual humans and not part of one category or another, and to treat them differently because of what category we see them as. And it needs dedicated work. It needs it's not something that we can expect to happen by itself. It's something that needs to be worked on. In Swedish, we have this new pronoun that is an addition to the traditional pronouns that we have of he and she, his and hers. And so it's the third one that has gained popularity during the last decade, where you don't specify the sex or the gender of the person, either because it's not relevant. You're talking about a person and you don't want to gender that person, or you don't want to give any extra information about that person. It's used a lot in professional settings to just where it's not of no relevance, the gender of the person, or it's used to refer to people who don't want to be referred to as he or she. But of course, there will be some people who think it's unnecessary or stupid, but it's definitely a commonly used word and a mostly accepted word. This word hen is replacing he/she, which was usually used before, or if we go back longer, you would just use he as a reference to all human. And I think it's a really important step towards not seeing the male as the norm in everything and the male as the universal, but to start being more truly universal and neutral.